Committee of the Review of the Implementation of the Convention, entitled Improving the Procedures for Communication of Information as well as the quality of formats of report to be submitted to the Conference of the Parties. And agenda item 4C of the Committee of Science and Technology, entitled Information on Modality for Reporting of the UNCCD 2018-2030 Strategic Framework. The documents before the committees are listed in today's journal and the UNCCD app. I give the floor to representative of UNCCD Secretariat, Mr. Jones Melosio Carica, to introduce the related reports.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates. Before I introduce the reports, I would like to make some reflections on the journey hitherto and the future aspirations. We have come a long way from 1999, when the first UNCCD reporting process was held in a purely narrative form. Today, we are able to regularly gather and analyze quantitative and qualitative data and turn this data into actionable information on progress in the implementation of the Convention. New technologies combining open geospatial information with cutting-edge cloud computing have enabled enormous volumes of data to be processed in the blink of an eye, so that all countries of the world have access and ready to use default data to support their national reports. What we are witnessing is a digital transformation towards global data-driven reporting. Our efforts are not in isolation. The UN Secretary General's data strategy calls for data to be used across the UN for action, for everyone, everywhere, and most importantly, that we leave no one behind. For the first time in the history of the Convention, we have trends on land degradation and drought, thanks to the data submitted by 126 countries in their national reports. While data gaps still exist, the early indications suggest that at least 100 million hectares of land are degraded every year, and that we need to restore 1.5 billion hectares of degraded lands by 2030 if we are to reach the LDN targets enshrined in SDGs. Over the next few years, the global community will be laying the groundwork for what comes after the SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, concurrently, the UNCCD will start shaping its post-2030 strategic framework. While it's early to say which form this new strategic framework will take, we sense that there is a continual and growing appetite for action to restore degraded land and enhance resilience to drought. Distinguished delegates, a new UNCCD monitoring framework should therefore support and possibly guide the policy debate on a new strategic orientation of the Convention, and be designed to enable the tracking of accelerated action at national level. And it should be firmly grounded in science and guided by robust data. It's encouraging to see that for the very first time, the two UNCCD subsidiary bodies are meeting jointly at COP. This session offers a platform for a two-way dialogue between the science and the policy committees to enable evidence, information, policy making. It is truly groundbreaking, and I commend you. So, with this in the background, I'm pleased, distinguished delegates, to present to you document ICCD CRIC 22/7 and ICCD COP 16 CST/8 jointly. This document provides information on how the Secretariat and the GM, including their partners, responded to the requests and invitations made by the COP in Decision 11 COP15. And based on the recommendations made by parties at CRIC 21, the Secretariat and the GM improved the reporting tools in preparation for the 2026 reporting process, scheduled to commence in the summer of 2025. The document offers some conclusions on how the ecosystem of tools for national reporting will continue to evolve in line with parties' demands, driven by data-centered partnerships and synergies with the Rio Conventions. The conclusions and recommendations section of this document should be read together with the draft decision 4 as contained in document ICCD CRIC 22/8. I thank you, distinguished delegates.
I take the representative of the UNCCD Secretariat. I give the floor to Ms. Nicole Berger, co-chair of the UNCCD Science Policy Interface.
Good morning, distinguished delegates. I am honored to be here this morning to open this joint session of the CRIC and CST and represent the UNCCD Science Policy Interface. I'm especially excited to share my thoughts on the agenda item on data-driven transformation of our work and thinking about the way we manage, share, and learn from knowledge has a power to fundamentally transform how we address the pressing challenges of desertification, land degradation, and drought. Knowledge is not just a collection of facts or data. It is a living system shaped by the tools we use, the perspectives we include, or sometimes choose not to include, and the partnerships we build. By embracing diverse knowledge systems and innovative approaches, we can create solutions that are not only more effective, but also more equitable and sustainable. So among the most promising opportunities before us, and we see over the last 2 years that the ground is really shifting beneath our feet, especially in the science community, is the integration of cutting-edge tools like artificial intelligence. This technology is not just about speed and working efficiently. It represents a paradigm shift in how we analyze data, predict outcomes, and make decisions. AI is a powerful tool that can help us uncover insights from the complexities of land management, enabling us to act more quickly, effectively, and inclusively. AI also allows us to process vast amounts of data from diverse sources, such as satellite imagery, soil health measurements, climate models, and social indicators, such as gender and land tenure status, very diverse forms of data. And by analyzing these data streams, AI might reveal patterns and connections that were previously hidden or too complex for more traditional statistical approaches, enabling us to make informed decisions more quickly and to enhance the speed at which we are able to learn from our actions. For example, AI can track the progress of land restoration projects in real time, identifying emerging drought risks and predict the long-term impacts of specific land-based interventions. It can help decision makers prioritize and allocate resources where they will have the greatest impact, ensuring that every action contributes to building resilience against a rapidly changing world. AI also has the potential to remove barriers to collaboration. So for example, in my time working at the Science Policy Interface, I've noticed that language differences in writing our assessments and technical reports often leave non-English speaking members at a disadvantage, contributing to their deep knowledge and expertise to these bodies of work that we're producing within these science policy communities. And so despite efforts to ensure gender and geographic diversity when putting together assessment teams, language barriers can limit equitable knowledge sharing. So AI also has some potential to level the playing field here. So for example, the leading large language model already operates in over 85 languages. I like to imagine a future where every scientist, policymaker, and representative of observer organizations and civil society can contribute equally, regardless of their native language. And this could also fundamentally transform how we work together, ensuring that all voices are heard and valued. And of course, we must proceed with care and clear intentions when incorporating these advanced technologies into our work. Concerns about AI's energy use, privacy, and security issues are all valid, and as we adopt these technologies, we should put in place clear safeguards for the use. So while AI provides powerful tools for analysis and prediction, it is also equally critical to integrate diverse knowledge systems into our work, such as indigenous and local knowledges. We are currently seeing rapidly growing interest in engaging in more diverse knowledge systems at the science policy interface. This year alone, research in the indigenous sciences and commentaries in leading science publications on frameworks and guidelines, ensuring that indigenous and local knowledges are respected and shared and on equitable terms, suggests that we are at a pivotal time to elevate and to braid indigenous and local knowledge systems into our work, and it presents an opportunity for deeper and more authentic engagement in this area. Indigenous and local knowledges are characterized by a deep connection to the local environment, a holistic understanding of nature, and for indigenous peoples' worldviews shaped by long resident oral cultures, grounded in reciprocal relationships with the land and relationships that have sustained ecosystems and communities for millennia. When we look at indigenous lands across the globe, they're among the most ecologically intact on the planet. Indigenous peoples manage or hold tenure rights over more than a quarter of the Earth's land surface, encompassing 39% of lands in good ecological condition, and their territories include more than 1/3 of the world's intact forest landscapes and are home to biodiversity levels comparable to or even higher than protected areas. These outcomes are not coincidental. They are the result of practices and principles deeply embedded in indigenous knowledge systems. In my work over the recent years with indigenous students, I've witnessed this relational perspective firsthand. And several years ago, a group of us created a summer program for indigenous students across the Four Corners region of the United States. And in the first day of the program, I asked my students, what made you interested in this program? Why did you sign up? And one of my students shared that when they saw the announcement for the program, that they would learn about sustainable land management, he said his first thought was, what is that? What is sustainable land management? So a term that we use all the time within this convention, within the science community, one of my students has no conception of what that means. So I quickly realized that I'd already made an assumption that we all think about land in the same way. And I want you to take a moment that as I'm speaking to think about, what does land mean to you? And that's what I did in that moment as I backed up and I asked the question, what does land mean to you? Their responses revealed a profound sense of kinship with the land, and one student shared that land to me is more than just the ground we walk on, it is a living thing. From a young age, I was taught that the land is not like a store. You can't simply take from its shelves and expect the item will be restocked the next day. If you are to take from the land, you must give back in some way or other. Land to me is like a good friend. So these perspectives are more than my own personal reflections of my own learning journey working with indigenous students and scholars, but they embody a way of understanding land that is crucial to our global efforts. Working across diverse knowledge systems that are grounded not only in the head, observations, global data, analysis of data, but also from the heart through love, respect, reciprocity, and long-term connection teaches us that land is not just a resource to be managed, but a living partner in our shared future. Of course, we must also proceed with care as we engage more deeply in diverse knowledge systems beyond mainstream science. We need to ensure that we minimize biases, work within ethical frameworks to guide collaboration with indigenous and local communities, and upholding principles of free, prior, informed consent is just a starting point, ensuring that indigenous and local knowledges are respected and shared in equitable terms. So I'd like to thank you again for the time with all of you today to share my thoughts and where we see opportunities to build a stronger, more robust, and equitable science policy interface within the convention. I believe these approaches offer a pathway to restore balance to our lands and communities, ensuring that the fight against desertification, land degradation, and drought is guided by both innovation and wisdom. Thank you.
I thank the co-chair on the science policy interface. At this point, I would like to welcome our panel. Mr. Neil Sims, Earth Observation Specialist of the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, co-chair of the Geo-Land Degradation Neutrality Initiative, and lead author of the Good Practice Guidance for SDG Indicators 50.3.1. Ms. Lucy Baker of the United Kingdom Centre for Ecology and Hydrology and lead author of the Good Practice Guidance for National Reporting on Strategic Objective 3. Ms. Ward Ansel, representative of Food and Agriculture Organization. Before calling on the panelists, I would like to remind the panelists of time limit of 10 to 15 minutes for presentations, so as they allow as much time as possible for interactive discussion. I give the floor to Mr. Sims.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here, and I'd like to thank the UNCCD Secretariat for giving me the opportunity to present to you today. I was asked to do a bit of a scan, a bit of a horizon scan of some of the technical details of the framework we've been using and some technologies that are coming up that might be worth keeping in mind as we move forward to 2030 and beyond. So today I'm going to talk to you about, give you a little bit of context about what we started with, where we are now, what's gone well and maybe what we need to focus on a little bit more in future, what's coming up next in terms of some technologies that might be useful, very briefly on that one, and some reflections that I dreamt up. My time zone is terrible from Australia to here, so I dreamt up about 4 o'clock this morning. I was quite wide awake, and so I've added a few things there this morning that I'll talk you through as well about this, the COP here this week. Probably many of you know how this works. It's amazing how many people don't. So the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we have the goal, of course, life on land, target 15.3, which talks about living in a land degradation neutral world. That's kind of what we want to achieve. And indicator 15.3.1 is basically how we measure our progress towards achieving that target there. So I've mostly worked on the indicator myself. Now, 2016 was when we were contacted first by the UNCCD to try and develop the methods for the indicator. We already had quite a lot of definitions that were considered immutable, right? We cannot change these. So we had a definition of land degradation, all by UNCCD decisions and articles. We had a definition of land degradation neutrality, right? That no net loss approach to land degradation. Work for me. Okay. And we had this sort of LDN framework there as well. So in that framework, it really had identified areas, parts of achieving land degradation neutrality where numerical assessment, monitoring and measuring was really required. And so then in 2016, there was a meeting of an experts group, came up with this document, the Framework and Guiding Principles for the Land Degradation Indicator, so not neutrality, but the indicator. And that provided also a lot of definitions in there. So the sub-indicators that we measure to track our progress towards LDN, some of the key elements required in a good practice guidance document to help countries report and measure on land degradation, some of the key functions that the methods needed to achieve, that global, regional data sets, right from global level to local level support really, and the process of validating the methods with stakeholders as we move forward. And so I was lucky enough to lead the project that wrote the methods for this, based largely out of CSIRO, but collaborative very much across the world. So we have the indicator that we talked about. It's a binary measure. Things are degraded or they're not degraded. And the measurement is in hectares, right? There's these 3 sub-indicators. It gets a bit convoluted, just bear with me, it'll be fine. So land cover and land cover change, land productivity, and carbon stocks above and below ground. Now, we don't really have a good data set for carbon stocks above and below ground at this stage, so we use soil organic carbon as a surrogate for that. Gets even a little bit more convoluted because for land productivity, we combine these 3 metrics. So one that looks at the long-term trend, one that looks at recent change, identifies recent change, and one that looks at the level of productivity locally versus regionally. And what we do is, for the sub-indicators, if any of those sub-indicators indicate degradation, then the pixel that we're talking about, the area that we're talking about, is labelled as degraded. That's called the one-out, all-out approach. So that was the foundation there. Now, what we need to do in order to understand a change in the extent of degradation is set an initial state of degradation. And so we have this baseline period. Essentially what we're saying is countries are committing to not exceeding the extent of degraded land that was observed in their country in 2015 is basically what it boils down to. And then we have these series of reports where we track progress on that. So that's the neutrality element, right? And the baseline setting process. So where we landed is that we have this scientific conceptual framework for land degradation neutrality. We have this good practice guidance document which guides countries to really use, get consistent methods for reporting and measuring on their land degradation and national ones. And then this third element here is the Geo Land Degradation Neutrality flagship now. And that is a really superb element in this whole process that draws on the data, uses tools and data sets and expertise advice, and links that to countries, and we support countries through GeoLDN to map and monitor that land degradation and achieve land degradation neutrality. Really phenomenal thing. I happen to co-lead that as well. What's been the successes so far? Well, the indicator was elevated to Tier 1 through a thing called the Interagency Experts Group on SDGs. That's the formal process. That's the highest tier level of SDG indicator, and what that means is there are formally accepted and clear methods, and countries are reporting on those methods as well. 2019 that happened, that was a fantastic element. The concurrent development of Trends Earth, which is the main software tool that draws on these big data sets to help countries map and measure and monitor their land degradation, the co-development of that with the good practice guidance document was a great way to do it. Very iterative, very collaborative. It's not identical. Trends Earth is not identical to the good practice guidance document, but it's very close and very consistent. And the ultimate test really is that we're getting reporting from many countries, 126 countries in total, as John's mentioned. We're getting many of these countries reporting on some of the different sub-indicators, but I think it's very strong. I believe it's one of the most frequently reported indicators in the SDG system. So we can be really proud of all of that. The GeoLDN flagship is another really fantastic success. That mechanism for impact, connecting through to countries, helping them interpret their data and find their data sets. Just to go on with that a little bit, GeoLDN, the group on Earth observations, it's the intergovernmental body that looks after sort of Earth observations globally. It has space agency representation, national representation, ministerial representation. There are many activities in there. GEO-LDN, the LDN program, is the only activity ever in the history of GEO to have been elevated from an initiative to a flagship while it's been there. That has been because of our impact, because of the interest of countries, and because of the support that we're providing. And a special shout out here to the German delegation, if there's anyone in the room. Their funding of the GEO-LDN has been transformational, something very useful, and I'm very grateful to you. Thank you very much. A measure of impact, again, we had 40 country teams apply to come and join a global dialogue forum of LDN in Cape Town at the GEO meeting last week. Very interesting. People were coming to see the GEO-LDN, get support for GEO-LDN. When I asked them, do you know what GEO is? Many of them didn't even know that was on. So we were the draw card there, right? That was good. We're a new model for engagement through GEO as well. Sasha Alexander, basically in 2018, I think it was, stood up next to me or nudged me and said, mate, I'm going to ask GEO to actually help us with this indicator. And I don't think GEO had ever been approached that way before by a custodian agency. New model for establishment, and we are demonstrating to GEO how to do impact through GEO. It's a brilliant thing. There's another organisation called CST, the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites. They coordinate civil satellite programs for global benefit. We're very closely engaged with the SDG team there now, and that's working very well. We are feeding back our needs to them. They are relaying that to the space agencies. Very, very supportive. There have also been challenges. Frankly, the indicator and LDN are complex, and complexity makes it difficult for people to grasp exactly what it is that we're talking about. And I think that is something to do with perhaps a lower traction than some of the other initiatives that we've seen globally here. LDN and 15.3.1 have slightly different data needs. Remember, the indicator is binary, but just knowing where land is degraded is insufficient to address land degradation. You need many other points of information about what's driving the degradation, how severe it is, what the land use is, what the land tenure is, those kind of things. There's a bit of a refinement process of the methods in the good practice guidance document for the indicator going on now. We're talking about a few of these points. There's a bit of a discussion happening. Just to note there that what's actually happening in there ultimately is that the guidance is transforming really from being very clearly about the indicator to more strongly being suitable for use for LDN. Much of that is a good transition. There's a few data challenges that we've got also with this indicator. The graphic on the right there is from CST. There's a really neat summary of the data needs and the methods for indicator 15.3.1 that they have produced with my help and made available publicly through CST. There's a bit of a link down the bottom there. I recommend you get that if you want a succinct summary of how this comes together. But basically, we need that long time series, and not all countries have access to long time series of data, and not all data sets extend back to from 2000 to the present. Most of the default data sets are quite coarse resolution, and of course for small island developing states, for example, that's too coarse. We don't get enough detail to help them plan. The methods that we developed are really best suited to temperate regions with the, where there's a sort of a distinct growing period. And of course that doesn't work for hyper-arid regions, and it also doesn't work in areas of the tropics. There are a number of other reasons why hyper-arid areas also suffer, unfortunately, through these methods. There's a bit of a program to help improve methods for those areas now. There's some data sets that lack a bit of consistency. We still are in this position where there's a diversity of methods to assess productivity and land degradation, and so we are unable really to provide a definitive measure of the extent of land degradation to anyone. There's still a lot of room for argument. A lot of that is real, and I'll talk a little bit more about that very shortly. Again, we don't have a good full carbon data set, and assessing soil organic carbon is very expensive and it's very difficult. It can change very dynamically or not change at all over long periods of time. Combining data sets to integrate new data sets with the old ones is something that is difficult. And that climate calibration point there really attributing degradation, trying to understand what's driving the degradation there, how much of that is from climate factors and how much of that is from bulldozers and concrete, right? So there's some work to do there. There's also some interesting emerging context there. So you may be aware that the indicator has been adopted into the CBD as the indicator, especially for Target 2, where we have to identify degraded lands and restore them. 30% of degraded lands need to be restored by 2030. That is fantastic. Something to keep in mind is, as we transition our advice in the Good Practice Guidance document towards LDN, I think what we should keep in mind is that it's not LDN being adopted by these other frameworks, it's the indicator. And so I think we just have to be conscious of the integrity of the indicator advice as we move forward. Climate change is a problem for everyone, of course. It is very difficult to know how things will change there. We're getting better at that, of course. Those three sub-indicators, land cover change, carbon stocks and land productivity, are the minimum set, and countries can add sub-indicators in there. If we use a one-out, all-out approach, we have to think about how to incorporate those, because the more sub-indicators you add, the more likely your pixel is to be identified as degraded, which has an impact, can change the perspective on the extent of degradation there. Importantly, the IAEG, the Interagency Expert Group, has responded to a call by the head of the UN, amongst others, about rescuing the SDGs. You will know that there has been some discussion around our likelihood of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. There is a process being proposed where the IAEG would go into the metadata and actually adjust the metadata that is used to measure the indicators, and while that may increase the uptake and simplify the adoption of indicators across the SDG system, it will also have an impact on it may have an impact on what we do in 15.3.1 on how we measure that. There's also a range of new data sets that are coming on board. Many are fantastic. Many will be really great for supporting our needs, higher resolution, higher frequency, all of these kind of things. In particular, there's two new technologies that I think are going to be really useful. LiDAR data from airborne systems and from the ground, and synthetic aperture radar data, which can give us much more information about the structure of the areas that we're looking at. We haven't even thought about including these data sets in the Good Practice Guidance document, and I think we should do that. Now, very quickly on the reflections, I was thinking here we have this fantastic facility that's been very generously produced by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It is a wonderful place. And I was thinking this morning, it's unfortunate, perhaps some of this might be a bit controversial, it's quite empty. It seems relatively empty. Maybe that's partly because of the scale, the wonderful scale of the facility we've been provided here. But I think there's got to be something we can do also. I think some traction with the public, some traction with policymakers. There's some room to go there to be as convincing as, say, CBD or the climate change, right? For example, the drivers of climate change are unambiguous, right? It's your carbon dioxide balance. For land degradation, there are many drivers. It's not as clear. The definition, really, we have tons of carbon dioxide, which contributes to climate change. The definition of land degradation is not as clear. If you had a scale from perfect land to very bad land, at what point does it become degraded? It's difficult to know, right? The impacts of climate change, of course, are global, and they impact land degradation. Coming from Australia, for example, I think about land degradation in Africa as something local and regional, and from drivers well outside my control. It's not as all-encompassing. There's much more consensus on the science around climate change at the moment than I think there is on land degradation. One of the tools that they have in climate change is this climate model intercomparison program. We're getting a diversity of approaches. Every time I talk to people, people want recommend their method for use in assessing land degradation. The CMIP program produces the graphs like are shown at the top there. It shows you the range of potential outcomes provided by the range of models that are included in the program as a suite of software. Maybe it's time for a land degradation model into comparison project. Maybe that's the better information we can provide to people around range of potential outcomes and forecasting for them. We don't really do forecasting for land degradation at the moment. So look, thank you so much for indulging me for a few minutes over time. I hope that was informative for you. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Sims. I give the floor to Ms. Beck.
Good morning, distinguished delegates. Thank you to UNCCD for inviting me to talk today about the potential of how we could, or the potential future direction for SO3 reporting on the components of drought risk. And similar to Neil, I have a little reminder of what Strategic Objective 3 was. I led the publication of the Good Practice Guidance, and so to mitigate, the objective is to mitigate, adapt to and manage the effects of drought in order to enhance the resilience of vulnerable populations and ecosystems. As a scientist, we approached this, or when we started, we were like, this is amazing. We've got all these great new tools and data sets that we could use that have just been developed, and we can apply those. We had some boundaries within which we needed to work to make it an appropriate document and guidance document for this global scale reporting. We had to scale back our ambitions ever so slightly, but that doesn't mean that in the future we can't make those steps forward and improve and enhance what we have in the Good Practice Guidance for SO3. So we're talking about 3 different indicators here that can be combined to give us an indication of drought risk. We're actually looking at these indicators individually, but they give us an idea of how we're doing or what the trends are in terms of the proportion of land under drought. Level 1, hazard. Level 2, around exposure, trends in the proportion of the population exposed to drought. And level 3 on vulnerability and how vulnerability is changing over time. We're talking about hazard here in the Good Practice Guidance in terms of the percentage of the land area in different drought intensity classes as defined by the Standardized Precipitation Index. At the time of writing, that was kind of the WMO standard for monitoring meteorological droughts. And as such, we took that forwards as the approach. The exposure indicator is very much linked to that first hazard indicator, where we're looking at the percentage of the population within each of those drought intensity classes. We've got a couple of examples of time series graphs that we created at UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology for the UK using in-country rainfall data from the UK Met Office and the population data from WorldPop, which is the recommended default data in the Good Practice Guidance. And then drought vulnerability. The first 2 indicators were relatively simple to apply and decide how we were going to calculate them. Vulnerability is much harder. In the scientific literature, there's much less agreement on how we should be monitoring and how we should be characterizing drought vulnerability. There are methodologies in the scientific literature where you need over 60 different factors to calculate vulnerability. And at the global scale, and finding a method that's going to work in the most number of countries, that simply wasn't going to be appropriate. We took forward the Drought Vulnerability Index, which was actually set out in the decision and the annex to the decision of what indicators you wanted to monitor these indicators using. So we used the Drought Vulnerability Index, which had the social, economic, and infrastructural component, but we also offered a tiered approach, which allowed parties to go into as much detail as they had data and capacity to do. So from using very simple methodology with maybe one indicator per component, so a social, economic, or infrastructure, and then also with the option to do sex disaggregation and also work at the subnational scale if that data were available. I should have added there also the default data from the JRC where they calculated the DVI at the global scale for 2018. So that's what we have in the GPG at the moment. In the appendix, we, as scientists, we couldn't quite help ourselves. We wanted to write what it's probably really what we wanted to do in the first instance if we hadn't had those kind of bounding criteria at the start. But also the CRIC requested the Secretariat and the global mechanism to enable the improvement of SO3 reporting by including elements that we'd included in the appendix. So things like for the level 1 indicator on hazard, using the standardized precipitation evapotranspiration index and considering hydrological droughts. For level 2 on exposure, considering ecosystems. The title of the GPG mentions ecosystems explicitly, but actually the wording of the indicators for levels 1, 2, and 3, we don't include ecosystems. And then there's also further disaggregation of the population data by perhaps rural and urban communities and by age as well. I'm not going to go into any more detail on exposure in the rest of my time. And then for level 3, really the key thing in that CRIC document was really making the spatial default data sets available so that we can start to look at identifying hotspots of vulnerability. So thinking about what difference might using a different drought indicator make on the level 1 indicator, we started to calculate the standardized precipitation index. For the UK and Thailand, we have since done this for other countries as well, but just 2 examples here around some of our other project work. But you can see at the top there we have time series of the standardized precipitation index, so the current default in the guidance, and some summary maps. And then at the bottom row is the same, but for the standardized precipitation evapotranspiration index. And although the shape of the population exposed to drought on the time series graphs is pretty similar, you'll notice that the drought intensity classes that they're actually exposed to change quite dramatically in some cases. So in Thailand, on kind of the last point there, it's around 2019 for the standardized, for the SPI, we have a large proportion of the population exposed to the most extreme intensity class. But if we then go down to the SPEI, they're exposed to less severe intensity classes. And we see the same in some of the UK data. Now, although this is interesting, the benefits of the SPEI are going to be most felt in more arid environments. And that's because it gives us a simple climatic water balance, which is really important when over 60% of our terrestrial precipitation is lost by evapotranspiration. And actually this year, the WMO Executive Council invited members to use the SPEI in addition to the SPI to monitor meteorological droughts. And so in the next, you can envisage in the next version of the GPG, you could then use the SPEI, to monitor that hazard indicator And we've included a couple of different SPEI data products on there. The first one a colleague has produced in collaboration with a researcher at the University of Oxford. That's a 0.5 degree SPEI data set across the world. And at the bottom we have the global SPEI drought monitor from coming out of the group in Spain. So a real positive step forward there. It's really interesting, but I think we would have to then take a step back and think about what difference is that going to make to the reporting that's already happened, and for consistency, and also thinking about if we do have those quite dramatic changes in drought intensity classes, that we need to understand what difference changing that indicator is going to make on the numbers that we're calculating and what that means in terms of our management. Oops. There are lots of different types of drought that affect all the different compartments of the hydrological cycle. And hydrological drought is one of them, thinking about river flows or groundwater levels. And the WMO Hydrological Status and Outlook System, HydroSOS, is working with national hydrological and meteorological services to produce a national to global scale status and outlook system, so we can understand what is the current state of water resources and how is that going to change over the coming 3 to 6 months. Due to that, this is really interesting, and I think it's a really nice link thinking about how we could monitor hydrological droughts. Hydrological services will be producing, hopefully, these sorts of indicators that tell us whether river flows or groundwater levels are above or below normal from what we might expect for the time of year. So we're already starting to do that analysis in some parts of the world. We're also working with global modelling groups to produce global scale data which can fill in the gaps in data sparse regions. And the Federal Institute of Hydrology from Germany, in a project called Outlast, the map at the bottom, in the bottom corner, is producing global drought forecasts, which we're including. The system is not supposed to be exclusive to only one data provider for these different indicators, and we're hoping that we can combine lots of different data sets from different sources to give us the best estimate of what the current situation is. Moving on to vulnerability, I mentioned at the start, thinking about the description of the 3 indicators, about the different drought vulnerability factors and the components that they fit into. I think it's 14 that we had here, with 3 kind of key ones highlighted in green across the 3 components, which are pulled together to give us the drought vulnerability index. In some of our project work, we calculated this again for the UK and Thailand. And thank you very much to our partners from Thailand for providing us in-country data. That in-country data that we had, we could only aggregate to the spatial scale that was common with these 4 very large regions across Thailand, which, if we're thinking about identifying hotspots of vulnerability, then this is proving quite a challenge to do something practical with the information. And from the first round of reporting, I think this is a fantastic example from South Africa, where they did this at a really local scale, and you can really start to identify hotspots of vulnerability and think where we need to target our actions and resources so we can reach the most vulnerable people. I haven't mentioned ecosystems yet, and so I will do for the last section of my presentation. There's a really nice recent UNCCD report looking at drought resilience indicators, and within that there's a whole range of ecosystem resilience indicators. My colleague Srinidhi Jha from UKCEH has therefore been looking at the relationship between the SPI and net primary productivity, to identify where regions that might be more or less resilient to droughts. So the graphs which will appear in a second. We're looking here at basically the ratio between the net primary productivity in drought months versus what we would expect in all months. And if that number is below 1, which is the horizontal line on the bottom graphs, that's indicating that those grid cells are less resilient to drought. So I should have added the graphs are for 2 grid cells in India, so really fine scale. And if the bars are above 1, that's indicating that that grid cell for that year was resilient to drought and could cope with the impact of drought. We also have the map in the middle, some really initial, like last week, global scale results, which we will be looking into further and thinking about why they're showing what they're showing. But we also want to obviously look at what difference using the SPEI would make on all of these results, thinking about that dominance of evapotranspiration on terrestrial landscapes. Finally, because I'm running out of time, impacts are often seen as the missing piece of droughts. They're harder to identify, or hard to identify when impacts are starting due to that fuzzy definition of drought. We don't always know that a drought has started when it starts. Drought impacts are often also collected after an event has happened. That also makes it challenging to work out what those impacts were. And so one thing that we and other researchers around the world have been doing is looking at the link between drought indicators and drought impacts, such that we can start to identify which drought indicators best represent the impacts on the ground, so that we can choose our drought indicators effectively and make sure that they are representative to what we're seeing and experiencing. And secondly, we can also use them to validate our vulnerability assessments, so we ensure that the most vulnerable regions that we identify using our vulnerability assessments actually are where those impacts are occurring. And if they're not, maybe then we need to assess and adjust our vulnerability assessments. Finally, I would say that that link between drought indicators and drought impacts means that we can start to forecast drought impacts using statistical methods, which again helps us identify where we're going and where we need to target our resources. So to conclude, yes, the science and data availability, WMO decisions have developed and moved on since we wrote the GPG, and some of those improvements that were set out and recommended in the CRIC are possible now, particularly thinking about exposure, and that better monitoring of droughts across hazard, exposure and vulnerability lets us know where we're up to, what's left to do and where. But my final message really is that more research is needed so we can take those developments and really make them into something that's applicable at the global scale and stands the scrutiny and makes sense for all regions. And to do that, a lot of collaboration is needed between researchers and the UNCCD community between now and 2030 so that we can make that happen in the future. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Barker. I give the floor to Mr. Ansel.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ward Ansel. I'm the head of the land tenure team in FAO, and I've been requested to present to you the state of affairs on monitoring on a certain number of thematics, a certain number of areas of work. And the areas we decided on to present to you is, first of all, land tenure. Second one is sustainable agri-food systems. And the last one is gender. We decided on these three thematics, or these three areas of work, not only because they represent FAO's and the UNCCD synergies, but mainly and foremost because they represent the areas of work that have already been decided at UNCCD. That's the case of land tenure and gender, or are very much present in the COPs and in the events UNCCD is organizing. That's the case of the sustainable agri-food systems. With tomorrow, I think, we have the food day. So what I will do here is go over these three areas of work and present you for each one of them 3 slides. And the first one will be, where do we stand? What are the facts coming out of this? Where do the SDGs stand? The second one will be on what are the main initiatives ongoing in these areas of work? And then thirdly, give you a simple example of what can be done with this information. So let us start with land tenure. You probably know these, but I think it's very good to remind them that worldwide, more than 1 billion people perceive they are at risk of being evicted in the next 5 years. That means that 20% of the world's population feels land insecure. It is estimated that local communities and indigenous peoples own between 30 and 50% of the land, depending on the statistics we use. But only 10% of these lands are being recognized and documented. On the other hand, we also know that if we do recognize tenure security, or if we do secure the land of the people, there's an increase of 40% of investment in land nationally, which translates itself in an increase of between 15 and 40% of the productivity and the income of these lands. Hence, it's not only important here to see that there's still a lot of work to be done, but also how important it is for UNCCD and other organizations to work on these aspects. And that was also reflected in the SDGs, because a full indicator on land tenure was adopted or was integrated in the SDGs. This is SDG 1.4.2, which looks at the proportion of total adult population with secure tenure rights. And whereas initially there was almost no data available on this SDG, today we have only 33 countries reporting on that. But there is data now available for more than 70 countries, and that have been submitted already, and that will become available in 2025. So we will have a representation of more than 100 countries on this SDG, which is very good news, of course. A couple of initiatives that I chose to talk about. And first of all, of course, is the FAO UNCCD initiative on integration of tenure to LDN and land restoration. It is a perfect example of how we can combine work on 2 sectors, in our case tenure, UNCCD case LDN, and how to combine them. Up to now, 5 countries have engaged in this process, and we hope that after this COP, means will be available to increase significantly the number of countries engaged in that process. Another one is the results of CBD a couple of weeks ago in Cali. It was decided that land tenure and land use would become a headline indicator for Target 22 on traditional knowledge. And in addition, it was promoted as a potential component indicator for various other indicators or targets to be disaggregated. In particular, Target 1, Target 2, and Target 3, with Target 2 being the restoration indicator, which directly applies to UNCCD as well. What can be done now? What is possible? Well, here I'm showing a map from Landmark. And Landmark is making visible, is mapping all indigenous peoples and local territories in the world. This is presently being complemented in the framework of the Global Land Observatory, which is an initiative of FAO, the International Land Coalition, and CRIC, with public lands, very important for UNCCD as well, as a lot of pastoralist activities happen on these lands, and as well as all cadastre information to include private lands as well. So we will have a full coverage of land tenure globally, which can then easily be combined with other data layers, whether it's land degradation, soil degradation, deforestation, etc., for which all the data are already available, as we have seen from previous presentations. Second, sustainable agri-food systems. And I hope you've seen the results and the data here at the COP. 1,660 million hectares of, there is in the world 1,660 million hectares of human-induced degraded land. And this is being increased by 5 to 7 million hectares per year, which is an increase of up to 0.5% annually. Over 60% of this degradation happens in agricultural land. Hence the importance to work for UNCCD on food and food systems. There's a huge amount of indicators on that, including led by FAO. And I don't have time here to go through all of them. I don't think that's important. What is important here is for you to know that these indicators exist and that there's data for these indicators. 2 points I want to make here. The first one is on SDG 2.4.1, which is on sustainable agriculture, and on SDG 6.4.2 on water stress. Both of these indicators have also been adopted by CBD and other Rio conventions. For both of these indicators, there is full coverage for every country, and almost full coverage for every country in the world, and can be tapped into. For all the other indicators, many of them have significant amount of data available. 2 of them on small-scale food producers and the average income of small-scale food producers, a bit less, but I know that data is available now for the next reporting round. So a lot of data existing here as well. 2 initiatives I want to put to the fore, but again, there's many. The first one is the 50 by 2030 Data Smart Agriculture, which is a multi-UN agency partnerships, which is transforming data systems within 50 countries to better integrate thematics that are of importance to UNCCD, such as climate change, desertification, degradation, etc. 35 countries are well advanced already. 15 others are in the process at the moment. Another one very important for UNCCD, I think, is the framework for ecosystems restorations monitoring. This framework builds on existing reporting processes and provides access to data methodology and guidance on a tool that exists in one common umbrella, all tools that exist already. So it's bringing all this together that can be used then for ecosystems restoration. This platform has also been adopted by CBD, and of course, can be of value for UNCCD as well. What is possible here? Again, many, as there's a lot of data, many examples I could have taken. I've taken here the human-induced land degradation layer produced by FAO and downloaded the data for 2024. And what I did here is I overlaid it with the tenure data of Landmark and also with land use data we have. And I've given here the example of Brazil, and we see here very well how interesting it is to overlay these data layers. We can see that there's more land degradation happening, or human-induced at least, in areas where there's non-indigenous peoples and local communities, so indigenous peoples and local communities taking better care of the land, but also in which of the sectors there's more degradation, and here it's absolutely croplands areas outside of indigenous peoples and local communities which are most affected. That brings me to the last sector, which is gender, if I can. There we go. Again, a couple of facts, but I think you know them. 43% of the agricultural labor force is made out of women. In Africa, it even goes up to 70% of some of the countries. However, women make up less than 15% of the landowners of these lands they are working on, they are producing on, and they are deciding on, but they do not have the rights on. In 50% of the assessed countries, legal protection for women, particularly for land rights, are insufficient. And here, FAO is leading on two SDG indicators, which is 5A1, SDG 5A1 and SDG 5A2. SDG 5A1 is a practice indicator. So it's to look at what is the percentage of women having the ownership of their land. And SDG 5A2 is a legal indicator to check which are the laws, which are the constitutions that make provision for women's land rights. And here, significant data is already available today. For 5A1, about 50 countries, and 5A2, about 77, and I think today is already 80. Again, here we have a large number of countries in the pipeline, pushing it up to over 100. And to confirm the message that Neil gave, for all the land indicators that I've been presenting here, we are in a good position to say that all of them will become Tier 1 in 2025, so will be retained in the SDG framework. Ongoing monitoring activities. Honestly, on gender, too many to present here, and I couldn't choose. So what I've done is I've given a bit of an overview of what is happening. We have gender-specific indicators. The two land SDGs, gender SDGs are an example of that. But we have also RRI's women's rights to community forests that is important, or the International Land Coalition, or Landex, that has retained a couple of gender-specific indicators as well. We have gender disaggregation data. For most of the data, we try to push disaggregation on gender, disaggregation on youth as well, etc. So for the FAO SDG indicators, about 26 are being disaggregated, but there's also, for example, Prindex that is allowing for full disaggregation and analysis according to gender. Then there's other initiatives that do not have a gender focus per se, but where gender is very prominent. And I highlight here the human rights monitoring tools, the one of the High Commission of Human Rights and also the one of TMG, looking at human rights and the land indicators in a joint navigator. And then lastly, all this data that exists is now being presented in an increasing number of reports and analysis. Mention here the status of women in agri-food systems, the unjust climate that FAO just published, the status of land tenure and governance that the Global Land Observatory will publish next year. But there's many others out there. So one example I want to give you is the example of the Unjust Climate Report that was just published. And the graph here shows that because of irregular weather conditions, the income of women, I can't read it here, but yeah, the income of women is decreasing by 8% annually. And the income for men is decreasing as well, this time by 3%. If there's an increase by 1% in temperature, it is estimated that this decrease will increase up to 34% for women and 24% of men. Not only does it show the deteriorating conditions of productivity and income for people living on and from the land, but it also shows you that these deteriorating conditions are leading to a widening gender gap, which I think is very important to retain here as well. Chair, this brings me to some concluding thoughts. As you can see from my presentation on the 3 areas of work that I covered, that there's numerous data initiatives that are ongoing and that are presently accelerating and being institutionalized, whether it's through the tier systems of the SDG, whether it was at Cali and the CBD, and being discussed here in UNCCDs. These are opportunities for UNCCD in the short and long term, without having to open up new boxes, without having to rethink the wheel and the work to be done. Data is there, methodologies are there, they can be tapped into. What is important, what I want to stress here, is the need for alignment and the need of integration of the monitoring of UNCCD, for example, together with the SDGs, together with the other Rio conventions and other frameworks, not only to lower the work, but also to upscale the impact of these monitoring activities. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Anso, and I'll hand the conduct of the meeting over to my fellow co-chair.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. It's a pleasure to co-chair the first ever joint meeting of both committees with you. Before I deliver a statement on behalf of the Bureau of the Committees, participants are advised that the floor is now open for comments and questions by parties and observers. Please signify, excuse me, check. Okay. Please, if you wish to speak. In the moment, I will now deliver a statement on behalf of the Bureau of both committees. In decision 11/COP.14, parties welcome the good collaboration between the CST and the CRIC on methodological issues relating to reporting. Based on this decision, the Bureau of the 2 subsidiary bodies have met jointly twice in 2024, on April the 5th and November the 12th. In these meetings, the Bureau discussed necessary activities to prepare for the upcoming 2026 United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification reporting process, as well as activities which may help to develop and enhance post-2030 UNCCD monitoring framework based upon sound science and guided by robust data. Having considered the outcomes of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the midterm evaluation of the UNCCD 2018 to 2030 strategic framework, the 2 bureaus concurred that some preparatory work would need to be initiated after COP16 to assess the responsiveness of the current indicators to that UNCCD strategic objectives, and to identify other indicators that could be used to track progress in the implementation of the convention in the future. It is important to note that time is of essence. The development of the current UNCCD monitoring and indicator framework took several years, from 2007, when the 10-year strategy for 2008 to 2018 was adopted, to 2013, when a minimum set of progress indicators was established in Decision 22/COP.11, thereby enabling parties to report using a standardized approach. So in order to ensure a seamless transition from the current strategy to the next, there is a need to devise a mechanism whereby the policy debate on a possible new strategic orientation for the convention is guided by sound scientific advice and lessons learned during the current monitoring process. And any new UNCCD monitoring framework should support and possibly guide such policy debate and be designed to enable the tracking of accelerated action at the national level. The Bureau have considered possible mechanisms that could assist in shaping a post-2030 UNCCD monitoring framework. Following due consideration of potential options, the Bureau concurred on recommending the establishment of an ad hoc expert group, subject to the availability of funds. This recommendation follows past practice in the UNCCD. In fact, in Decision 19/COP.10, parties established an ad hoc expert group for the refinement of the indicators. In the same decision, the COP tasked the CST Bureau to develop terms of reference and selected members of the group based on applications received in response to a public call for experts. Using this as a model, the Bureau have agreed to propose that the CST lead this work and provide insight of said expert group. Draft Decision 4 contained in document ICCD/CRIC 22/8 proposed language that, with your help, should be fine-tuned to properly capture the way we move forward. The selection of a group of experts should pay due consideration to the broad range of specialized expertise required across the diverse and interdisciplinary domains under the UNCCD mandate. And in doing so, the selected group of experts will lay a strong technical foundation and secure the long-term effectiveness of the UNCCD's monitoring strategy. So transparency is key. Therefore, we should also ensure that at various stages of these processes, parties can provide feedback to the expert group, including during the 23rd session of the CRIC, if parties so decide. So this is the message. This concludes the statement on behalf of the Bureau of BOT Committees. And before proceeding further, the Bureau of the Committees have proposed the establishment of a joint contact group on matters that relate to both committees. It is my understanding that the facilitators of the contact groups of the respective committees will co-facilitate the joint contact group. So may I take it that the committee wishes to establish the contact group and to appoint the facilitators of the contact groups of the committees as co-facilitators? So I hear no objections, so it is so decided. Thank you. Please be advised, too, that the first meeting of the joint contact group will take place today, Wednesday, the 4th December at 6 p.m. in room MET 13. So After that, we will now proceed to hear the statements from the floor. So I give the floor to representative of Kazakhstan.
Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, вначале разрешите представиться. Меня зовут...
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mohed Timajanov, and I am the chair of the committee responsible for land resources in Kazakhstan. I'm the national coordinator for the UNCCD convention. That's one of my roles as well in that post. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Republic of Kazakhstan, allow me to begin by most sincerely thanking you, particularly thanking the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but also the Secretariat for the excellent organization of COP16 and the very warm welcome we have received. The very warm welcome extended to delegations coming from the entire world. As I think you're aware, yesterday at the Water Summit, the President of Kazakhstan visited this conference. This year we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of the UNCCD convention, and I congratulate you and all of us on that milestone. We have this convention as a tool, as an instrument to meet and overcome the challenges related to desertification and land degradation. The countries in Central Asia are faced with major challenges such as land degradation, drought, and the reduction of water resources and scarcity of same. These problems are a challenge to security, biodiversity, and sustainable development inter alia. In Kazakhstan, we're enacting measures and we're being very proactive in order to achieve land degradation neutrality, LDN, as well as to ensure sustainable land management. And these are our twin priorities in this field. One of the key measures that we've enacted is the creation via a governmental decree of a single service on land and land management. This single body allows us to measure and assess our land and soil resources, including our geobotanical and agrochemical resources. This also means that we can carry out soil assessment and monitoring. Over the last few years, we have conducted a study of more than 17 million hectares and a further 20 million hectares of forested and vegetation land. And we've also been assessing soil quality on more than 11 million hectares. Thus far in 2024, we have continued to be proactive, assessing millions of hectares of soil and geobotanical resources and to assess inter alia their productivity. Kazakhstan is also digitalizing its land management registry, covering a surface of more than 200 million hectares, 100% of our conserved and protected territories. All of this will be available online, and a similar project is in the pipeline for next year for other parts of our land and soil management, and this one in particular focused on a more effective and efficient use of water resource management. There is currently a draft bill before our parliament in Kazakhstan on soil protection. We have a national program which is focused on the integration of modern technologies for land use management, for land restoration, on the mobilization of investments, and on the sustainable development of the forestry sector and of ecosystems. We work very closely with local and indigenous communities, which guarantees that we can have long-term results, long-term successful results. Colleagues, COP16 is a golden opportunity to discuss frankly and openly existing challenges and to work together to find solutions. We wish to underscore our deeply rooted attachment to the United Nations Convention to combat desertification as a tool, and we stand willing and ready to share our own experience to strengthen national cooperation and to move forward those initiatives that will bring us closer to achieving the SDGs. Let's work together to transform our ambitious objectives into concrete actions and make further headway towards a world free of land degradation, a sustainable and prosperous world for us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I thank the representative of the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Dear delegates, it is my privilege to deliver this statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The European Union and its member states emphasize the importance of reporting, especially within the framework of the voluntary land degradation neutrality targets and Sustainable Development Goal Indicator 15.3.1. We align with our goals of the UNCCD Secretariat and the Global Mechanism for a Digital Transition and support the ongoing collaboration towards this aim. We applaud the initiatives undertaken by the UNCCD Secretariat and the Global Mechanism to enhance information sharing procedures and improve the quality of reports submitted to the Conference of the Parties. The European Union and its member states encourage the continued development of PRICE by the UNCCD Secretariat and the Global Mechanism, especially as it addresses future system needs and maintain flexibility. We highlight the importance of providing accurate default data to parties and appreciate the efforts have been made in this regard. We value the collaboration between the UNCCD Secretariat and the Secretariats of the Convention on Biological Diversity and Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, which facilitates data exchange, joint capacity building, and tool interoperability. The European Union and its member states recognize the importance of strengthening national capacities for parties to report on the implementation of the Convention. To this end, we commend the UNCCD's efforts to engage with financial partners and foster collaboration to support the reporting process. We especially welcome the increased funding from the Global Environment Facility for the next UNCCD reporting cycle. We believe it is vital to thoroughly assess the budgetary implications of reporting tasks and to communicate these transparently to the parties. It is crucial that parties are informed of the timeline and deadlines well in advance to ensure that are properly prepared for the reporting process. The European Union and its member states find the proposed timeline for the upcoming reporting period to be appropriate, as it aligns with the UNCCD agenda and allows adequate time for parties to prepare their reports. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Give the floor to representative of Lebanon.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Chair. Allow me to take this opportunity to once again thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the very warm welcome, very generous welcome extended to all of us. My thanks also go to the Secretariat for the excellent preparation which has clearly gone into this conference. 126 states are scheduled to submit their national reports. In other words, less than 60% of those states have acceded to this convention, and that does not augur well. It's not a very positive sign. These information communicated in reports such as these ones do not give us a complete overview of the actual situation when it comes to land degradation around the world. And that leaves me asking, why is it that 40% of the states parties to the convention are not submitting their reports? That's a large number, and I would imagine it's largely driven by lack of financing that has not been guaranteed in time, and that's what prevents these 40% of states from submitting their reports on time. In my view, Lebanon is amongst those who have submitted their national reports, and we've managed to do so despite the extreme challenges and difficulties that we're confronted with when it comes to funding from the IMF, but also the steps that need to be taken to strengthen and boost national capacity. All of this boils down to the fact that we're not happy with the quality of the report. We're not persuaded by its quality. That said, we do thank the technical experts who have been appointed by the Secretariat to provide us with the necessary technical assistance to organize a further round of national workshops intended to boost our capacity to improve that overall reporting. Concerning the previous reporting period, next reporting period, it is our hope that it will be more productive. We, under that cycle, have already submitted a technical assistance and funding request. We hope that that funding or financing will be made available to us before the deadline for report submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Chair. The United States would like to thank the speakers for their informative presentations. We look forward to contributing to efforts to improve reporting, including reducing the costs and complexity of reporting. We also hope that these efforts will increase the extent to which the data can be used to support national and local decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. We give the floor to the representative of Argentina.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, the presenters, for what was a very excellent set of presentations and all the information and updates that you provided us with this morning. I'd like to share with you on behalf of the Argentinian delegation some of our own lessons learned over the last 2 price cycles, beginning with some specificities with regard to the indicators. We share the view shared by the panelists about the indicator on carbon stock trends, which is not just a complex indicator, a complicated one to wrap your hand around, and we need to work a great deal on fine-tuning it, but we also lack clarity about what the thresholds of these carbon stocks are to be able to determine or pinpoint levels of land degradation. We also find more complexity related to dry lands where the measuring periods that have been suggested to us under the related indicator do not necessarily correspond or coincide with the low organic soil-based carbon stocks in these dry lands and the lack of variability that they demonstrate over the measuring period. So, picking up on what was said by the previous delegate, there's a need to think a little bit more about the costs and the complexity involved in this monitoring and the indicators and the periodicity with which we need to submit our reports and see if that could be adjusted. On the general indicator on the overall proportion of degraded land, in Argentina, we've been thinking about the possibility of expanding and retuning the transition matrix so that we can measure and pinpoint more specific changes in different types of land coverage. We need to make sure that we have a more streamlined tool when it comes to indicator calculation to help us achieve that expanded overview. It's also very important for many countries to incorporate other indicators that would measure complementary processes of land degradation and desertification, such as erosion, salinization, and compacting of lands, of earth or soil. We would also suggest that we use new modalities, including numerical modalities for indicators and measures. We could talk about the different degree and level of land degradation and have actual numerical indicators to that end. With regard to drought, we agree with the difficulty inherent in the vulnerability indicator on drought. In Argentina, our Bureau for Drought Monitoring is seeking to work on the indicator shared with us on drought vulnerability by the related panelists, but to include there an environmental element. So we will be interested in anything you can share with us about methodology that can be used to measure resilience of ecosystems, twinned with that. I'd also like to use the time given to me to take the floor to share with you all that Argentina wasn't able in the previous prize to use the prize platform due to the fact that said platform does not recognize in its database mapping the existence of a sovereignty dispute on the Malvinas, nor is that included in the footnote with the dual nomenclature. They are not referred to as the Islas Malvinas, Falkland Islands, as they should be in the related footnote. They are only referred to as the Falkland Islands. Given that País and the and on the basis of this, we decided at national level not to use the prize platform because of this failure, because of this shortcoming, this failure to adhere to accepted language. In addition to that, there are also some technical difficulties when it came to including or uploading our own mapping to the prize tool or the prize database, particularly given perhaps due to the sheer size of a country such as ours and the difficulty that this gives when it comes to mapping. We believe, therefore, that to improve the next reporting cycle, the flow of information to national authorities needs to be more orderly, more regular. The handbooks, the guidelines that are provided, more regular and more coherent information on timelines, deadlines, what's expected, etc. And a set of tools need to be available to make sure that we streamline the tools, streamline the indicators that we are submitting, and also streamline the tools that we have available for data gathering and data evaluation, data assessment by countries. We also need to boost capacity so that we have more capacity in place, more timely capacity in place, which we know was lacking in the previous price cycle. With regard to the Secretariat, the process seems to me focused on data. That's what you're keen to get. But countries need data plus strengthened national capacity for the implementation of the convention in our territories. That needs to be the overall goal and thrust of the price. This is exercise. Thank you very much.
Now I give the floor to a representative of Algeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I'm much obliged to you, Chair. Algeria would like to convey its deep gratitude to the Science Policy Interface, the SPI, for the drafting of this very detailed technical report. This document represents a major step forward when it comes to our fight against desertification by highlighting innovative solutions and approaches that are data-based that will help us to improve the follow-up and monitoring approach and the reporting process under the Strategic Framework 2018-2030. The report details efforts to update tools, particularly the price platform, which going forward will integrate advanced functions for the analysis of data and for data management. The report also underscores the importance of strategic partnerships, such as that we enjoy with Conservation International and the GEO, in order to improve the technology that we use. The report also refers to the fact that partnerships are vital when it comes to drafting and putting together geospatial norms and standards. When it comes to biological biodiversity, technology will then mean that we can expand our objectives and will ensure that we can adopt an integrated approach to the restoration of land degradation. The report also provides a structured calendar or reporting time frame for 2026, or the reporting cycle scheduled for 2026, which will begin in 2025, with clear steps for capacity building and strengthening for the submission of reports and for data analysis, with the technical and financial support from the World Environmental Fund and from partners such as the UNEP and the FEO. The report also talks about an ambitious digital transformation intended to integrate modern up-to-date technology, including artificial intelligence or AI, into our working processes. This demonstrates the determination to create a 2.0 version of the system that is properly positioned to tackle the complexities of the task that we have before us under the UNCCD. We welcome all these innovations and we stand ready to work in close partnership and collaboration with the international community to achieve the stated goal of land degradation neutrality and to forge a sustainable future for one and for all. I do have a question for Mr. Neil Sims before I wrap up, and I thank Mr. Sims and congratulate him for his presentation, which was extremely interesting and rich in detail. I would like to ask, where is the place for flora in the indicators and sub-indicators used for land degradation measurement for flora and plants? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to a representative of China.
Thank you, President. First of all, thank you very much for the Secretariat for this interactive dialogue and explaining to us the SO 2 and 3 indicators of national reporting, especially the gender segregated data and its use. We wish to emphasize that we emphasize the efforts of the Secretariat in the past 2 years to enrich the default data and the capacity building. But we need to emphasize that countries differ in their conditions. When refining indicators in national report, the methodology, we need to listen to the views of the parties. Like in our statement on behalf of the Asian Pacific Group, we hope that at the regional and sub-regional level, we could hold expert seminars and find the problems in the report in the previous cycle and find the solutions and listen to the views from the region. For the affected states, when using default data, we also found some problems. We propose that the Secretariat, on the basis of using diversified default data, will ask the state to give consent to such use. Otherwise, when using default data, there will be differences and problems. We highly commend the Secretariat in changing the data to actions, correct and guiding actions. We need to improve the accuracy of data. On this basis, we hope to conduct more cooperation with international organizations and research institutions, especially listening to the views from regional experts concerning the problems as well as the solutions to adapt to the situations in different regions. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to representative of Lesotho.
Thank you, Chair. Lesotho appreciates the reports and commends the valuable insight that they provide in advancing objectives of the UNCCD. To ensure these findings lead to impactful and sustainable actions, it is crucial to align their recommendations with the Land Degradation Target Setting Program. This program is central to global efforts to combat the land degradation and achieve sustainable development. Furthermore, the UNCCD framework must be closely aligned with reporting mechanism. Here we refer to the reporting mechanisms such as PRAISE to ensure coherence and consistency. By integrating national data to validate devolved data set, the framework can support the evidence-based decision-making that reflects the realities on the ground. Such alignment not only strengthens the credibility of reporting, but also ensure that the actions are context-specific, measurable, and effectively contribute to achieving land degradation neutrality and other UNCCD goals. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Shukran, Sayyid al-Rais.
Thank you, Chair. Given that I am taking the floor for the first time, allow me to preface my remarks by thanking the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for the excellent organization of COP16 and for the very warm welcome that they've extended to us. I would like to make the following points, if I may. When there are delays in financing for the capacity building strengthening program, a program which is intended to support the timely submission of reports on desertification in Syria, and we did experience such delays in financing, then that leaves us in a very difficult position when it comes to submitting our report, as you might imagine. Moreover, financing simply didn't arrive in Syria. We simply didn't get it. A major challenge, as you would agree. Secondly, and against that backdrop, we need to expand the level of financing so that we're in a position to fulfill our reporting obligations within the agreed timelines. The third point I wish to share with you, the convention contains data when it comes to the demographic situation in Syria, but the data in the most recent version are erroneous. They're different from our national data. So I hope that the data that feed into the convention's database is checked to make sure that it's compatible with the data supplied by our government, which it should be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I'll give the floor to the representative of Venezuela.
Gracias a la presidencia.
Thank you to the chair. In Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, we're building a country with an eco-socialist model, which is a pillar of social economic growth in harmony with nature. We are increasing, therefore, measures contributing to LDN, reducing loss of biodiversity, and taking measures against climate change. Even though we have a country besieged by UCMs, we continue hand in hand with our people contributing to the salvation of the human species and nature. Venezuela has an exceptional chance to show first-hand progress made in political level, focused on combating desertification, degradation and droughts. For example, there's the National Reforestation Plan 2022-25, together with the Arbol Mission, Tree Mission, action to restore vegetal coverage and land restoration in degraded areas. Implementation on the land, in the ground, is carried out with eco-socialist committees who are guardians of the tree, brigades against climate change, which guarantee proper implementation of programs that are made. These include Arbol studies, where we engage students in the reforestation process, conserving to restore endangered species, and restoring life in river basins and restoring urban spaces, redeveloping them with areas of reforestation and family agroforesting, which includes in agricultural activities reforestation. Moreover, we've incorporated the adoption of plants to anyone who requests it. Therefore, the reforestation plan addresses comprehensively the challenges faced by the country when it comes to conservation and sustainable management of national resources, integrating LDN in that process. In terms of the theme of land tenure, we have a land law enabling delivery of land tenure instruments, which gives the right to millions of agricultural producers in our country. In that context, Venezuela recommends the Secretariat and to the GM improvements to communication reporting procedures due to past experience with the price for experience, where we faced various complex difficulties that could affect effective implementation and quality of results. For example, when it comes to connectivity, to address those challenges we cannot stress the important work of the facilitators, their support that we've had in Latin America. We note positively the work of the Secretariat in researching an initiative to develop changes that would enable digital transformation and forms of professional upskilling of personnel to harness digital tools and taking advantage of human intelligence and AI with a strategic perspective of combating land degradation and droughts. In terms of complying with nationally voluntary measures for LDN, we recognize the need for additional financing, and we maintain our request to expand the participative process of the parties in the program for establishing LDN 2.0. We also need to step up support so that the LDN methodology be transformed into a tangible, easy-to-understand tool for policymakers and the public in general. Therefore, we propose first action, continue providing capacity-building support, especially through sub-regional web seminars, and 2, technical support to implement quantitative assessments and participative mapping of degraded lands. Thank you to the chairs.
A representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And then I give the floor to a representative of the European Space Agency.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to thank the speakers for their presentation, and within this joint plenary, point out the availability of Copernicus data. Copernicus is the European Union's Earth observation program. The first satellites, Sentinel-1 and 2, were launched in 2016 and 17. These are publicly available satellite data streams at 10-meter resolution with the dense time series. The satellites will be continued, so we can approach the baseline of 15 years, often made as the optimal time period for the land degradation assessment. On land cover, we made big progress in our capacity to map large areas at 10-meter spatial resolution. Soon, global land cover datasets at 10 meter with high accuracy will be available through the Copernicus Global Land Cover Monitoring System. Also, big progress on change detection was made, which is a key factor for land degradation assessment. Essential is the consistency of annual maps in the time to develop solid change detection methods. In all of this, advanced artificial intelligence, like machine learning and deep learning, help him quite a bit in the methodology development, not only for the robustness of the global and national land detection models, but also to produce reliable change detection maps. Once we will have a solid baseline with Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2 data, we are confident to be able to go back in history, including Landsat data, and have consistent time series of annual global maps at 30-meter resolution since the beginning of 2000. On the land productivity, the situation is a bit more complex. A dense time series, up to 15 years, are needed to capture the phenology of the productivity. We can demonstrate that with the Sentinels and some modeling, we are able to reconstruct the phenological profiles of vegetation in large part of the world. The time series of Sentinel is still a bit short to capture those 15 years, but already provide useful information for partial levels. In addition, with the global land cover mapping, we can also customize land productivity analysis as a function of the land cover and land use, as the land productivity analysis needs to be tailored to the type of land cover. For the ability to monitor above ground carbon and carbon stocks, it's still a bit more challenging. We still need to work on the carbon stock modeling, both above ground biomass and for the soil organic carbon. This remains a modeling challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to the representative of the Partnership Initiative on Sustainable Land Management.
Thank you, Chair. It gives me great pleasure to address this delegation for the first time as PISLM, so thank you very much. The PISLM, which is the Partnership Initiative for Sustainable Land Management, is an intergovernmental organization in the Caribbean with a mandate from Caribbean SIDS responsible for the UNCCD to implement the UNCCD and land and soil components of the Barbados Program of Action coming out of the SIDS conference. Currently, the PISLM serves as the premier organization for implementing the LDN mechanism in Caribbean SIDS. We are proud to inform the delegation that through partnerships with governments, international organizations like the FAO and the GEF, we are successfully implementing the CSID Soil Care Phase 1 project, which have begun to deliver updated soil maps for its country parties in over 50 years. This will help the countries in accurately measuring the LDN indicators and report on them through the price reporting mechanism. We are most pleased to inform also that PISLM, working with the FAO and GEF once again, that Phase 2 of this project will begin in 2025, which will see updated soil maps and build capacity in soil labs and transformation of landscapes of 14 Caribbean SIDS starting 2025. Additionally, the PISLM is currently working with the global mechanism to develop and implement a regional land degradation neutrality transformative project that will not only transform our island landscapes, but make them more resilient to natural disasters, droughts, and climate change. In conclusion, the PISLM successfully implemented the last price reporting cycle in the Caribbean despite financing and technical shortcomings. We supported 11 Caribbean SIDS in this effort. Our efforts were commended at CRIC 21 and recommended as best practice from the region for other regions to emulate. Chair, I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the representative of the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity.
Thank you, Co-Chair. As this is the first time that the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity is taking the floor, I'd like to begin by thanking the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for their kind and generous welcome here in Riyadh and their excellent organization of this 16th session of the Conference of the Parties. We would also like to thank the Secretariat of the UNCCD and the Global Mechanism for preparing the detailed report on this agenda item. The CBD greatly appreciates the support that UNCCD has provided for the development of the methodology for monitoring and reporting of the headline indicator for Target 2 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework on areas under restoration. We look forward to continuing collaboration with the UNCCD in improving knowledge and understanding to what extent data on land degradation could support defining a baseline on the degradation of terrestrial ecosystems both nationally and globally. The upcoming reporting cycles of UNCCD and CBD largely overlap in 2026. Countries could take advantage of this period to organize joint national consultations, in particular with regard to the use of geospatial data on land degradation, delineation of LDN activities, and areas under restoration submitted through the Framework on Ecosystem Restoration Monitoring, or FIRM, a platform for harmonizing data collection on restoration. This would greatly facilitate synergies in reporting, increasing data complementarity, and improving knowledge and information, and eventually enhancing the implementation of land restoration programs. Co-Chair, I would like to inform you that the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the CBD in Cali, Colombia, a few weeks ago, requested the Executive Secretary to advance the work of biodiversity-inclusive spatial planning relating to Target 1 of the KMGBF in consultation with parties and other multilateral environmental agreements. We welcome the work of the UNCCD, GOLGN, and other partners in providing methodological support to the countries to integrate LDN in national land use planning. The experience of UNCCD could help us fill in the methodological gap on Target 1 of the GBF and its indicator on the percentage of land and sea covered by biodiversity-inclusive spatial planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to a representative of civil society.
Thank you, sir. Namaste, Jai Shri Krishna. I, Ujjwal Anand, on behalf of the aggregated civil society organization participating in COP16, emphasize the critical need to strengthen reporting mechanisms under the UNCCD in order to improve transparency, accountability, and informed decision-making processes. Therefore, we call the implementation of the following key measures. First, inclusive and participatory reporting frameworks. Ensure that reporting processes actively involve civil society, local communities, indigenous peoples, and other marginal groups. Their contributions are essential for the comprehensive understanding of on-the-ground realities and assessing the effectiveness of land restoration initiatives. Second, standardized and user-friendly formats. Develop clear, consistent, and accessible reporting templates that accommodate data from diverse stakeholders, including non-state actors. This will ensure that the submissions are comprehensive, comparable, and actionable. Third, enhanced quality of information. Promote capacity-building initiatives aimed at strengthening national and subnational reporting entities, providing training on data collection, analysis, and report standards to enhance the accuracy and utility of the reports. Fourth, demographic-sensitive reporting. Incorporate gender, age, culture, and other demographic variables into reporting guidelines. This approach will enable a more nuanced understanding of impacts and facilitate targeted interventions. Fifth, innovative technology solutions utilize digital tools and platforms to optimize data collection, analysis, reporting processes. Implementing accessible online systems can minimize administrative overhead and enhance operational efficiencies. Lastly, monitoring progress on SDGs. Align UNCCD reporting with Sustainable Development Goals, particularly indicators like 15.3.1, that is land degradation neutrality, and 1.4.2, that is land tenure security. This alignment will strengthen coherence across global frameworks. Lastly, I would like to say the above suggested measures will enhance the reporting processes and will strengthen the Convention's capacity to monitor the progress, identify critical gaps, and facilitate meaningful actions. We encourage parties to emphasize inclusivity, transparency, and accessibility in all reporting frameworks, ensuring that the perspective of all stakeholders are effectively represented. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to representative of the civil society from Uganda. Excuse me, civil representative of civil society.
You open the thing. Open the thing. Open it.
Thank you, Chair, distinguished delegates. On behalf of civil society organizations attending COP16, we acknowledge the importance of robust, transparent, and inclusive reporting modalities for the UNCCD, the 2018 to 2013 strategic framework. Accurate and comprehensive reporting is critical to monitoring progress, identifying gaps, and fostering effective action against desertification, land degradation, and droughts. We recommend the following key measures. First, inclusive reporting process. Actively involve local communities, indigenous people, women, and youths in the reporting cycle. Their lived experience and traditional knowledge are vital to accurate data and relevant analysis. Secondly, standardized and flexible format. Develop streamlined reporting templates that accommodate diverse contexts and capacity while ensuring comparability across countries and regions. Such tools should allow for disaggregated data to highlight impact and vulnerable population. Thirdly, building capacity. Provide technical and financial assistance to national reporting teams, particularly in developing countries, to enhance their capacity for collecting, analyzing, and submitting high-quality data. Fourth, alignment with global agendas. Harmonize UNCCD reporting modality with indicators from Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 15.3.1, line degradation neutrality. This alignment will reduce redundancy and promote coherence in global monitoring efforts. 5, initiative data collection tools. Leverage technologies such as remote sensing to complement ground data collection. These tools can improve the accuracy and timeliness of reports. And 6, transparency and accessibility. Make report publicly available to foster accountability and allow civil societies and other stakeholders to contribute to their refinement and use. We urge parties to adopt those recommendations to ensure the UNCCD reporting framework is inclusive, effective, and aligned with global sustainable development objectives. Together, we can create a transparent and responsive system that drives meaningful progress. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll give the floor to representative of Uganda.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Anna Rose Ademun. I'm reading on what Uganda is presenting. Uganda has adopted the food system approach recently advanced by FAO by formulating a national food system transformation program in 2020. This program enables all sectors relating to food systems to harmoniously work together. This has been presented as Uganda's position under a number of fora, including the African Union, South cooperation, and importantly, the G77, where we are the chair. Similarly, this is an opportunity to drive restoration, land tenure, and land degradation agenda for transformation of our economies at local, regional, and global levels. I encourage all parties to relate on this approach to support vulnerable communities in our states. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Representative of Uganda. I invite the speakers to briefly respond to the comments made and questions posed by parties and observers. So I give the floor to Mr. Neil Sims.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for your comments, everyone. Just very quickly to the delegation from Argentina, thank you very much for your thoughtful comments. It would be wonderful to talk with you more about these issues. You raise very good issues, and so please come to the GOLDN pavilion, which is in the green zone. If you can see it there, there will be many people there who would like to talk to you about this. I extend that welcome to everyone here, actually. GOLDN is designed to help support you in your decision making. We are here with the pavilion in the green zone. And just a quick note that the funding for GOLDN ends in the next couple of years. And so anyone who's got loads of cash lying around and would love to support us, that would be greatly appreciated as well. Many thanks also to the delegation from Algeria and your question on the flora and the plants. I think actually there are two places. One is in the land cover description. There are many levels of detail to which the land covers can be described, and some of those can be quite specific and others more aggregated. One of the things that we found in the good practice guidance document was that the demonstration classification scheme that we used there was taken as really the one that should be used, and really it was just a guide there, so thank you very much. But there's the land cover type, and also combined with a productivity assessment, I think that might be something that we combine there as well. Thank you also to the delegate from the European Space Agency. Certainly we are discovering that carbon stocks are challenging, but the Sentinel program is a wonderful gift to the world, really. And you know, we thank you very much for your support, and it's been underpinning many wonderful analyses. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So now I give the floor to Mrs. Lucy Barker.
Thank you, and thank you again for the comments from everybody. It was really interesting to hear, and particularly from Argentina regarding ecosystem vulnerability and resilience. We've been thinking about this ourselves, and I think there's a lot of scientific questions that we need to answer, and methodologies that need developing. Existing global methods, when we wrote the GPG, were focused on ecosystem services rather than the functioning of the ecosystems themselves. So that is something that we would need to think about, what approach we would like to take. Regarding resilience, I think it's a wider question of whether that's an additional indicator within the SO3 reporting. It doesn't necessarily fit in with the three that we have already. So I think that would be a bit more of a dramatic change to the structure of SO3 reporting. So that was all I was going to add. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we give the floor to Mr. Ward Ansiew.
Thank you, Chair. I can only underscore and confirm many of the things that have been said here. Three particular specific responses I would like to make. And the first one is to the Honourable Delegate of the European Union about interoperability. And we can only stress that the need for this interoperability, not only to reduce the workload and thus the costs, not only to reduce the complexity of reporting that we've heard here, but also to allow us to start tracking all these indicators over time. the simpler we make the reporting system, the easier it will be to engage in the reporting and to engage in the reporting over time. The second one is to the Honorable Delegate of China. And we can, again, only confirm what you have said. We need to avoid these discrepancies between the reporting done by UN agencies like mine, national reporting, civil society reporting, etc. It's important to understand discrepancies, but it's also important to overcome that. And therefore, we think and we engage in a more consulted approach to these processes, and the indicators and methodologies need to be co-constructed. If there is a request on data on specific areas, to FAO for example, we will ensure that this is done with the parties and with the representations of civil society, of indigenous peoples, etc. If we agree on the basis, on the indicators and the methodologies, these discrepancies will be avoided subsequently. And then lastly, to the Honorable Delegate of the CBD and on firm. We are presently already looking to align the data on land tenure with the firm platform. So thank you for your recommendation, and it's aligned with what we're doing. Indeed, it's not about aligning indicators and methodologies only, because if we use different platforms and different ways of collecting data, again, there will be this data discrepancies. So it's also good to align the platforms that are behind the indicators and the methodologies. And that's what we're trying to do for land tenure and firm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now I give the floor to representative of Mexico.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chairman. It's the first time we're speaking in this forum, so Mexico would like to thank the Secretariat of the Convention for their support in that participation, and Saudi Arabia for their hospitality. Mexico reiterates its commitment to cooperate with the international community to combat the advance of desertification, land degradation and droughts at national, regional and global levels in the context of the climate crisis, and support a comprehensive approach based on science. We support the recommendations to strengthen the scientific process of the Convention. Mexico recognizes the importance of stepping up financing for the purposes of research and building national capacities, ensuring that decisions and strategies adopted have the support of robust scientific data that's pertinent, stressing the importance of technical, scientific and technological advice to support implementation of the Convention. We recognize the need to bolster institutions and strategic operations at all levels to harness the best available scientific knowledge and preserve traditional knowledge for sustainable use of land to improve the ways of life of populations affected by desertification, land degradation and drought. Similarly, we recognize the emphasis placed by Secretariat to create partnerships based on data to support national reporting, monitoring, impact evaluation and decision-making, informed decision-making, moreover. The parties have recognized that Decision 26, COP14 on land tenure is a milestone. It's necessary to keep working on it, both in the context of policies and programs to integrate land tenure within implementation of the Convention and in initiatives regarding LDN, as well as in transformative LDN programs and policies. To that end, national consultations organized and held in the context of the joint initiative of the FAO and the CST are based on conditions in countries. Mexico is one of the 5 countries selected to hold national consultations on land tenure, stressing through its approach gender equality and the participation of organized rural groups, including indigenous people, Tepehuanos, Mixtepos, Orgánicos, and Mayas, among others. Under that context, we stress the need to foster development of comprehensive sustainable policies when it comes to land tenure through incentives for the conservation, community participation, and strengthening rights to land tenure, contributing to reducing deforestation, land degradation, and loss of diversity, as well as preventing socio-environmental conflict. Mexico also calls for making effective cross-cutting of a gender perspective in strategies and national policies, promoting collection of gender disaggregated data to assess the needs of women and measure the impact of public policies and programs directed towards women in the context of desertification, drought, and land degradation. We propose integrating socioeconomic themes such as gender, migration, and land tenure, together exploring their interactions. Our country has adopted regenerative agriculture based on agroecological basis that can be adopted to produce crops and livestock and other basic commodities. The country is reviewing and establishing national targets to neutralize land degradation and will propose objectives related to soil restoration, efficient use of hydro resources, land conservation, carbon sequestration, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. When it comes to agroecology, Mexico implements programs with a goal to step up production of key elements in grassroots communities who are highly vulnerable and contribute to food self-sufficiency of the country. Similarly, we've also been implementing a program, Doctors of the Soil Initiative, that seeks to train farmers for sustainable management of agricultural lands in Mexico. Thanks to that program, which is supported by FAO and coordinated by the University Program of Studies and Sustainability from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, farmers receive technical information that allows them to diagnose and improve the quality of soil in their communities. Lastly, we'd like to mention the proposal proposed by Mexico and that the president of our country presented during the G20 a few days ago in Brazil, to do with appointing a percentage of military spending to reforestation. I think it's very important to give a new approach to programming national budgets to increase expenditure for the environmental sector as opposed to the military sector, taking away from the military, giving to the environment. Thank you.
In the name of Mexico, now I give the floor to representative of the UNCCD Secretariat. No? Okay. So we have thus concluded this stage of the consideration of Agenda Item 3 on the Committee for Review of the Implementation of the Convention entitled Improving the Procedures for Communication of Information, as well as the quality and format of reports to be submitted to the Conference of the Parties. And Agenda Item 4C of the Committee on Science and Technology entitled Information Modalities for Reporting on the UNCCD 2018-2030 Strategic Framework. Before adjourning the meeting, I wish to remind participants that the second meeting of the Committee for the Review of the Implementation of the Convention will take place this afternoon at 3 p.m. in this room. The second meeting of the Committee on Science and Technology will take place tomorrow, Thursday, December the 5th, at 3 p.m. in this room. Please also be advised that the first meeting of the CST contact group will take place today, Wednesday, December the 4th, at 1 p.m. in room MET 14. So with that said, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.